when I come to these things and I listen to meetings and I pay attention and I participate, I get to hear these nuggets. And, for those that are here for the last rock and got to hear Ricky speak, I've come up with a new term. It's called the golden nugget. The nugget is a piece of information that helps me change my perspective on how to look at the world. And for those that didn't hear Ricky talk about Earl last rock, ask somebody about Earl, and it will help you. Our next guy is, part of the power of our fellowship and how we reach out is the H&I meetings, the hospitals and institutions, people going out into those meetings and touching people that are in the institutions. Our speaker last night talked about how that's how he got here. And our next speaker, I believe, is the same thing. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what Ben has to say. With that, I'll give you Ben.
Good morning. My name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's August 24th, 2011. I have a home group in East Marietta. I have a sponsor that knows he's my sponsor, and he has a sponsor that knows he's a sponsor. And I have some sponsees that I'm not sure if I'm their sponsor, so kind of how it goes. But 20 minutes, 6 hours, it doesn't matter. We can only scratch the surface, so I'm going to just try to focus on the surface here and kind of jump straight to the point. So I grew up 30 minutes east of Akron. I found Alcoholics Anonymous in the Georgia State Prison. My entire life was devoted to mind-altering substances. My parents split up at an early age. Family was broken. I had a little brother. We traveled all around. We did not have anything really rooted. And at 5 years old, my mother got involved with a man who was very physically abusive. And he decided that he was going to teach us how to get high at that age. So 5 years old is really when it started. I don't know what life was like before that. All I knew is that drugs and alcohol were as detrimental to my way of life as breathing and eating. It was just something that I've always done. So I didn't really know how to love. I didn't know how to love people. I didn't know how to be afraid. I didn't know how to get over fear. I didn't know how to do anything. I knew how to get mad and drink. I knew how to be fearful and drink. And I think that I always was looking for something to make me feel better, right? I didn't really have the role models in life. And so at a very early age, I started seeking other people to cure that. A lot of women in my life. I've got 5 kids. I have 4 baby moms, and I kept looking at them to be the thing to save me. Right? I didn't know that the alcoholism was the problem. I didn't know learning how to live or not knowing how to live life on life's terms was the problem. I never considered sobriety as a solution. It just I tried the different things. I tried snorting cocaine instead of smoking crack. I tried beer instead of liquor. I tried the clear stuff. I tried the opiates, but honestly, I was like one of those guys that really liked things that made my heart go boom, and I liked women in my life that would clean up my mess. I guess I had a little bit of abandonment issue, a lot of deep resentment toward my mother as a result of the life and the upbringing that I had. And so I would take hostages along the way. I've got the DUIs. I've got a rap sheet as long as dude last night. I'm not going to one-ump him, but it's kind of short. And it's really just how it is, and I just kept doing that, and I would get by. People always told me you had potential, and I went to high school with the local judge's son. And for years, it was just time served, time served, time served, girls bailing me out, folks bailing me out, all this stuff, until I started getting into the narcotics, and then all of a sudden, I was no longer a misdemeanor guy, I was a felony guy. And I remember a guy in a court saying, "Oh man, I don't even waste time with misdemeanors, I'm straight felonies," and I was like, what a douchebag. That's who I became. I became that guy. But in the midst of having all these kids with all these different women in these different states, I kept thinking that I was going to be the father that I didn't have, but I didn't know how to be that father. The type of father I was is the one that crawled through the window in the middle of the night to rob my rent money Well, my daughter found me, and I kiss her and send her back to bed and tell her I love her, but I actually have no idea how to love her, because if I did, I wouldn't be doing that. So I tried to imagine what life was going to be like, going to the bar and telling the bartender, just Coke. Or going to the trap house and being like, nah, I'm just here to kick it. I never thought that I would have to change where I hung out. I never thought that I would have to do something different with my life. So August 24th, 2011, well, I ended up with a string of felonies, and those felonies I managed to squeak by on some probation. And then I quickly got some more felonies. And that probation officer was in a different county, and she was pissed that I wasn't in prison and said that she'd see to it that I was. That kind of goes against the plans I got. Plans are not go to jail. I'm like a 60-day, 90-day guy. This lady's talking about putting me away. So I did what I did, and I manipulated someone, and I got a bus ticket, and I took off to Georgia, and I thought I was going to hide here, and you were only going to drag me back to the state of Ohio in a box. That was my deal. Well, I quickly showed up with me, and I ended up with some felonies here. And August 24th, 2011, the police are knocking on the door. And I thought, that's weird that they're here. I was coming out of a blackout. I had just kicked in a door the night before, went in and robbed some things out of a house. And I look up as I'm sitting there in the back of that cop car, and I see her, my girlfriend, standing there holding our daughter. And something was different this time. I didn't think, oh my God, is she going to leave me? Is she going to be there for me? When am I going to see her again? The first thought I had in my mind was, I can't believe I don't have to figure out how to not use today. That was very short-lived, and I quickly wanted to kill myself once all my jailhouse lawyers told me how long I was looking at. So I ended up there. I didn't have a bond, and I was sitting there, and I was waiting on sentencing. They gave me 3 years, and I hear this thing called AA. And so I signed up for AA, and it's so funny, Damon, you're sitting right there. Damon was one of the gentlemen that brought H&I work into Cobb County Adult Detention Center, him and a gentleman named Marshall, and I think a guy named Rich. I don't know. Rich said some stuff I didn't like life's better than my wildest dreams. And I thought, how animated. I couldn't understand that. I didn't know what that meant. But I kept on with what I was doing, and I went, and they shipped me out. They sent me down the road, and when I got down the road, they told me I could get credits for AA, and I got papers, and so I didn't really understand what AA was. I felt a draw to it the way I felt a draw to a preacher on a Sunday who was talking right at me, that conviction, that invitation. That never worked for me. It was always good for a moment, but by Sunday at 1, I'd forgotten everything. So that conviction never stuck. When I got shipped out of that camp, I ended up in a county camp up in North Georgia, Hall County, and a guy named Pat came in for H&I work. And Pat was successful and well-spoken, and I thought, I have a lot in common with Pat. It was the strangest thing when I say that right now, but Pat was willing to take me through the steps, and I wasn't really sure that I was an alcoholic. I was really just trying to look good for the parole board. And so he says, well, we're going to read the big book, and we only get an hour a week. So he told me to go ahead, and I saw over 550 pages, and I thought, that's a lot of pages, man. I didn't have anything else to do, but 550 pages seemed like a mountain to me. So he told me to read the first 164, so I did. And then it was the second time I was reading the first 164, and I saw the bottom of page 37, and it talked about a chronic jaywalker. And I don't know why that day, but the words jumped off the page right at me, and it was my moment where I thought, oh my God. I substituted the jaywalking with alcohol. I substituted it with drugs. I substituted it with women. I substituted it with my kids. I thought everything was my solution. I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I said, oh my God, I got it, and I don't want to be this. Coming to step 1 was not easy for me, because I didn't think I was an alcoholic, because I thought it was just my lifestyle. I thought I could do it in some way, shape, or form, and I'll tell you, when I ended up in that prison and everybody left me, that's what I thought they left me, right? I would later come to believe and find out that I had pushed them away. And it was exactly what I needed. Because if she would have answered the phone, God. He would have answered the phone, God. Parole officer, God. I was looking for something and I didn't have it. And that's what made me available to be able to see that on the bottom of page 37. I needed the time, I needed the space, I needed no distraction. I was constitutionally incapable of being honest until it jumped out and hit me in the face. So I became willing to do whatever it took, but I wasn't completely willing on step 2 and step 3. I didn't want anything to do with the God because that conviction that I got on Sundays was always short-lived, and I just didn't know how to put my faith in that. So what I ended up doing was I just jumped right into step 4, and I got stuck. And my sponsor said, boy, man, you're really angry. How's your prayer life? And I said, it's for weak people without a hustle. It's praying hands or begging hands. I'm not begging. And he said, good. So every day for 2 weeks, you can get on your knees in the morning and at night, and you're going to pray for all those people that you're mad at. And you're going to pray for them by name. And I said, all right. I said, who do I pray to? And he said, pray to my God. So I got on my knees and I said, dear Pat's God. And I did this, and I had been making fun of guys in the prayer circle. I said, chain gang, Jesus ain't going to save you, man. We're all on the recidivism list. We're all coming back. And I got down on my knees and I started to pray. And after a few days, I started to mean it. And when I started to mean it, I was all in. That's when I became all in. I became all in and completely willing to do a fearless and searching and thorough inventory, but I wasn't willing to share all of it while I was still in prison because I was afraid maybe he worked for them. And I didn't want to do a confession list. But the first 2 columns were very easy. What I was pissed at and why was very easy. That list, that went fast. But I started putting people on there that probably didn't need it, like people that walk in front of the car slow, going to the grocery store, and through the parking lot. It's like, dude, treat it like a street. I got to use the turn signal. What's up? So, but anyways, it was like that. And then I saw those other columns that I had to do, and I was like, man, that's going to be a lot of writing. Maybe I can amend this down and get to the ones that are important. And so I worked those steps, and step 6 and step 7 kind of looked like a flyover step for me. So it was a kind of nod step, I read them and I wrote out my list, and then I got transferred to a camp that didn't have anything. I didn't know how I was going to live in the real world when I got out, but I'd gotten out shortly after that. I'd done most of my time to the door. They put me on parole. I paroled out to my dad's house, who started selling weed, and I said, I'm on parole, right? Like, they could come by anytime. And so I did what I did in AA, and when I was in prison, and I went and I found a sponsor. So I bounced around for a couple of years. I wasn't sure, do I belong in AA? Do I belong in NA? Do I belong in CA? Because I arguably fit into all of them. So I found a home in AA, and I found a sponsor in AA, and we went through those first sets of steps again. And I got up through step 4. And step 5, and step 6 and step 7 weren't nod steps for him. We worked those out of the 12 and 12. I worked every step out of the big book except 6 and 7. And when he had a list of questions for me, and one of them was, what character defect do I still exalt in? So I had to look up exalt. And I said, oh man, this is worse than my 4th step. Because the 4th step, I was able to just blow it off as that's the past. I don't live that way anymore. Step 6, that's what I'm doing right now. And that one was a little terrifying. But we persevered and we worked through it. And when I got out of prison here, I was still wanted in another state. I decided that, like I said, I took off, I came down here. I had felony warrants out for me. I spent 7 years of my life as a fugitive trying to hide out. And as I worked my way through these steps here, I outgrew my recovery bubble. Boy, it blew up fast. Things started coming, opportunities started to take place in my life, but I didn't have a driver's license and I had a lot of things to take care of. In my little recovery bubble here, I had the opportunity to be a walking big book, and people that I used to drink and use with started wondering if Ben could do it, could we do it? I'll talk about two of those people. One of those people is one of the mothers to my daughter. And as a result, she decided to get into the program. And the other one was my longest running buddy, and that was my little brother. And I had the opportunity to take him to his first AA meeting. So I'm getting to do 12-step work before I've even gotten rid of the wreckage of my own past. I decided to ask this girl to marry me, and she said, not until you get those warrants taken care of. I knew it was coming, so what did I do? I called the clerk of courts in Youngstown, Ohio, and I asked him who my original attorney was because I was too blitzed when I was there the first time to catch his name. I got an attorney, and he asked me, he said, when's your sobriety date? And I said, August 24, 2011. And he said, all right, I'll work with you. And that was important to him, and he said it was important to him that that I knew when I was sober, because otherwise I was probably lying. He said, anyone that doesn't know isn't telling the truth. And I thought that was very interesting. So any of you that don't know when your sobriety date is, you might want to figure one out. So what I did was I called an attorney and we set it up. And I needed to do this because the 9th step says I make direct amends wherever possible. Not when it's convenient, not if they show up where I'm at, but wherever possible. And I had 3 kids in the state of Ohio, I had 2 in the state of Georgia, and there was a part of me that was empty and missing. And I thought that I could get through without that. My brother had 7 months sober at the time. We flew up there, and I walked into a courthouse. And I sat there in that lobby, and I prayed, God, grant me the serenity over and over and over again. And I said, if you let me out of here today, I'll never go back. And if you don't let me out of here today, I'm already free. And the serenity just hit hit the floor. It was a puddle. I got up in that courtroom, and I stood there, and for the first time in my life in an open court, I spoke, so I'm glad you got to do it here. And I got the opportunity to tell my story and tell the truth to a judge. I had a judge, my attorney, prosecutor, a bailiff, and a probation officer. And I had my newcomer brother, and we had no idea what was about to happen. And I told my story to that judge, and that judge got up from behind and came down and shook my hand and told me congratulations. And she let me walk out of there that day. I went and I was high on that. I could not believe it. My brother and I, we said, where are we going to go? And I said, take me to the biggest building you can find. I got a strip of photos of me and my brother with goofy photos at a mall in one of those little photo booths. Man, I felt so alive. I still had a lot of wreckage, though, that I needed to take care of. And so on that high, I decided that maybe I need to go take care of these misdemeanor warrants in the other county. So I went and did that. And then I said, man, I'm on a roll. These were amends that I swore I'd never make. I was never going to go back there. And next thing you know, I'm in the child support office, and I'm making that amends. And that amends right there opened the door to my children. And I had the opportunity to learn how to let them come to me. And so I started paying child support and had the opportunity to make an amends to my ex-wife. I had the opportunity to make an amends to my oldest daughter. I had the opportunity to be at the wedding and be announced as her father. And this is a little girl that I used to tell that I loved as I was going back out the window. I'm a grandfather today. From doing 9th step work, I get to be a part of that. It's not just a title, it's something I am. I had another daughter, because they were spread out. And she was in a relationship with her mother where her mother was getting physically abused. And it was taking place in front of my daughter. And I was able to walk into a courtroom in Cobb County, pro se, and go for emergency legitimation papers. I was able to fight for emergency custody, and as a 5-time felon that was once a fugitive, before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, or before Alcoholics Anonymous got to me, I walked into that courtroom, and that judge gave me custody of that little girl. And I drove to Richmond, Virginia that day. They wanted me to put a credit card on file to rent a car, and I only had a $300 limit and a shitty credit score. Dang, I almost made the podium without cussing. Anyways, I didn't have a good credit score, and I didn't know, so we ran the card anyways. And they said, yeah, it's good, you can go. And I said, what the? I found out my credit card the same day I got custody of my daughter increased my limit $2,000. So I drove straight to Richmond, Virginia, with a set of papers that said that I am allowed to have my daughter. And I called those police, and those police had me surrounded in downtown Richmond. And for the first time in their life, they weren't there for me. And they went inside that hotel, and they grabbed my daughter out. And she said to me, thank you. Thank you. She asked me to come get her. I told her I would, and I fought for her. And she said, thank you. That daughter just turned 18. She's getting ready to graduate high school. And that girl that was standing there holding my baby at the top of the driveway that I wasn't thinking about is my wife today. She works a solid program. She's arguably one of my greatest spiritual advisors. Some of us just get it a little quicker than others. But if we stick around long enough, it will happen. I had a son. He was a little argumentative, and he was my last holdout. And when I finally got the opportunity to make an amends to him, I asked my sponsor, what do I do? What if he wants to fight me? And he said, good. This is what you want. You want a relationship with your son. This is what you got to do. And today I get to give him all sorts of business advice on how to start a business. So I've been able to get to be a mentor to him. But again, this is 20 minutes. This could be a 6-series, mini-series, and only scratch the surface of the world. That's what's inside the world. That's what's inside the world. That happens when those pages come to life. And I just want to say that I'm really grateful to be here. And I met my sponsor here, and he's here right now. And I just want to thank you guys and encourage you to make the most of this. Stay open-minded and keep trudging the road. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ben. I talked about nuggets earlier, and one that if I pay attention when people are sharing, whether it's in a meeting or a speaker meeting, I get to hear these nuggets. And one of the nuggets I got from you was being available for recovery. If I'm not available for recovery, I'm not gonna get sober. So thanks, Ben. That was great.